So we're gonna break down some of the key maintenance and care steps that you can do to keep your trolling motor running like new for years to come. We're gonna talk about 10 of those today. The nice thing is, they're very simple, they require very little tools, and honestly, they don't take a lot of time. So we're gonna get right into it. So the first step, and it's probably the most critical, and honestly, it's the overlooked step for most people, and it's actually really easy, but it's inspecting for debris or fishing line behind your trolling motor prop. Simply what we're gonna do is flip this horizontal. There's a reason for that, we'll get to that. Grab your 9/16 socket here, and you're simply going to loosen that. Take this nut off. Keep this horizontal with the blades. There's a washer in here as well, so you want to catch that so you don't lose that washer. Set that aside, and you're going to check for any weeds, grass, any kind of debris. Fishing line especially can damage this, and there's a seal in here, and when fishing line gets in there, especially like this, you'll see got a little bit of braid here. That can actually go in there and break this seal, which allows water to get into the lower unit of the trolling motor. Not good for the trolling motor. So obviously it's recommended as you're on the water, make sure you pull off any weeds or debris that is on your prop, and especially when you get to the access, pull that stuff off. But doing this every so often, however often you have some time, it does not take a lot of time, as you can see. So it's just a good step and a good way to prevent any damage to the lower unit. So while we have the prop off, that brings us to the second step, which is actually to inspect this prop drive pin. So as you can see, this is horizontal. When we pulled that prop off with the prop blades horizontal, that's so that this wouldn't slide out vertically. So really we're gonna pull this out, inspect this for any bends or cracks or if it's actually broken. These are meant to break under pressure. So if you're actually trolling through an area and you hit a stump with your prop or a rock, this is meant to break so that it prevents any damage. They're very inexpensive. They're like 60 cents or something around that. So it's always a good idea to, pick up a few extra of these, keep them in the boat with your fuses and stuff like that, just in case you ever break one. So we've inspected that. This one's nice and clean. No issues on that, straight. We're gonna pop that back in and we're good to go there. So we're gonna grab our prop with our washer and our nut here, and we're gonna kind of align that up again horizontally. There's some slots on the inside. Slide that right back on. There's our washer. Put that on, hand tighten here. Grab our socket. Tighten that up. It's nice and snug is really all you need. You don't need to over tighten it. And you're good to go. That's been inspected. Do that, every couple months, or depends how often you fish, but it doesn't take a lot of time, so it's a good step. And we'll move on to the next one. The third step is pretty simple, but whenever you get a chance to wash your boat, it's really good just to simply give your trolling motor a quick rinse of fresh water, clean it off, keeps any dust or grime out of places. Just good to keep it clean in general for the long-term use of your trolling motor. For you saltwater guys, obviously you clean your boat, you clean your reels and rods with fresh water after every use. Same thing should be said for your trolling motor. All right, so step number 4, we just rinsed down our trolling motor with some fresh water. Either let that air dry, wipe it down with a cloth, but what we're gonna do next is actually lubricate the trolling motor shaft. We're gonna do it here on an Ultrex, but this is really important on electric steer motors because of the shaft going through a housing and everything, but it's very simple. All you need is a water-based silicone or water-based spray like this Pledge. This is just a multi-surface basic household cleaner. Inexpensive, and you probably have it in your house. But it's very important that it's water-based and not oil-based. So really what we're gonna do with this, you're simply just gonna spray some of this into your cloth here and work this down the trolling motor shaft. Just lubricate that nicely, get both sides. Obviously we have a cable running here, so if you can get under that, even better. And that really just helps lubricate this shaft, keep everything moving smoothly. Obviously we recommend you probably do this a couple times a year, or more often if you use your trolling motor a lot, but we wipe down our boats all the time, so it's a good time to take a moment to just kind of lubricate this and keep everything working fresh. So simple cleaner, simple process, move on to the next step. So our fifth step is actually just going to run through our trolling motor, make sure all of these bolts and everything on here is just nice and tight. Being a boat owner, you know that vibration is an enemy of our boats. We tighten different areas of our console, bolts come loose, screws come loose all the time from the abuse that our boats take. But we also drop these trolling motors constantly throughout our day of fishing. So it's important to kind of go through, make sure these are tight, just to really protect the trolling motor, make sure everything's snug and prevent any additional damage. So for most of this, we're just going to grab a simple Phillips screwdriver, start with the side plates, kind of run through some of these different mounting areas. The actual mounts to the boat, we got some screws in there. You can tell this plate's a little loose, nothing major, but make sure that's nice and tight. And really just run through everything, tighten those up, just to really prevent any additional damage. All right, so for step 6, we actually moved from the bow of the boat to the back here, and we're going to talk about power. So for our trolling motors and electronics, one of the most important things is clean connection to power. You know, our time on the water is valuable, and a lot of our issues, minor issues, stem from power. So we're going to come back here, just a real simple tip. You know, every so often, or even before every use, it's good to come in here and just check your terminal rings. Make sure all your connections are tight, they're snug, that you're getting clean power to your trolling motor. So we're just going to come in here with our socket and just really make sure that these are nice and snug. You don't need to over tighten them or anything like that. Make sure those are nice and tight, both sides. Another good thing too is make sure, you know, these are strapped in nicely too, so that your batteries aren't wobbling around back here, loosening those connections. And then from there, really you want to check obviously your terminal points just to make sure that there's no corrosion. If there is, just grab some very fine sandpaper, kind of clean that off. And then also check your power here and make sure that when those go to the terminal rings, that those are nice and snug and that those aren't loose or anything like that. If they are, replace that terminal. And because if you don't have clean power, that's where we run into some issues with power in our trolling motors and fish finders and things like that. So that's a good thing to do. And then obviously if you have some old wiring in your boat, if there's any corrosion or cuts in your power cables, it's good to just swap that out, get that clean, make sure you have good connection. You can also check on your circuit breaker for the trolling motor, check those connections as well. Make sure everything's nice and clean and snug and clean power provided to the trolling motor. So for number 7, we're going to stick to the topic of power and batteries. And one of the most important things to the lifeblood of your boat and your trolling motor, your electronics, is your batteries. And keeping those healthy is very, very important. Saves you money in the long term as well. But properly charging your batteries is very important. So after a day of fishing, making sure you plug those in right away, get them fully charged. It's just good for the health of them. But then also beyond that is having an onboard charger that allows you to properly charge different types of battery, whether you run AGM, lead acid, or lithium. Having an onboard charger like the Minn Kota Precision, it allows you to, you know, charge based on the charge curve of your specific type of battery. So whether you have a lithium or lead acid, that'll charge these batteries properly based on that type. So plugging that in at night when you're done fishing, letting those charge fully before you get out again, it's just good for the batteries and the performance of your trolling motor. All right, so for our 8th step, we're going to be talking about trolling motor cable and wire management and inspection. So obviously when you install your trolling motor, you want to make sure that these cables all lay nicely. They're not in the way of anything else or in the way of the bracket that could pinch any of our transducer cables or any other cables that we have here. Obviously we have a 360, we have multiple items here, so there's more cables. So we just want to protect those, make sure those are good. So a good thing to do periodically is just kind of come through, check all of your different cables, make sure there's no cuts or nicks, and give them a quick inspection, make sure they're good. One thing you can do, as you can see, we've just used electrical tape here. Pretty basic setup, but at least you can tell that this is nice and clean. There's no cables that are hanging way off the side that could potentially be cut or caught in a bracket. Nice and clean. So you can do electrical tape. There's other solutions like PET braided sleeving, which is similar to like your rod socks, things like that. You can run all those through. Nice, clean setup. There's also some aftermarket options. I know TH Marine makes a troll jacket, which just Velcros around it. Really great for protecting those cables and keeping those in a good condition and clean on the front deck. All right, so step 9, we're going to be talking about the foot pedal here. This is going to be only specific to people running a cable steer motor. We have an Ultrex here with this cable steer foot pedal. And one thing too, these pedals come preset from the factory with a certain tension. Over prolonged use and over time, those may loosen up. You may notice your foot pedal being a little loose. So this is for those of you that may have noticed your foot pedal being a little loose. Simple process, really. You can come down here under your cables. There's a foot pedal tensioning screw. We're not going to adjust it on this one. This one's actually nice and tight and we have a good feel with it. But for those of you that may have noticed that or come across it down the road, really you can just pull your pedal out, flip that over, and you'll see a screw there. We recommend you look at your owner's manual and what it recommends there for any adjustment to that, but just something to keep in mind down the road if you notice or encounter that experience. All right, so our 10th step is for those of you who store your boat for longer periods of time. So we're going to talk about prolonged storage prep and a few little things that you can do. First thing you want to do, come back to your batteries, unhook your trolling motor cables from your battery. Actually pull those off. You want to make sure obviously your charger goes back onto there. We'll connect that later. And then on the topic of chargers, it's good to make sure that your onboard charger is plugged in for any prolonged storage. That'll allow it to give the proper charge curve based on long periods of time, and your battery being full really keeps your batteries in a healthy state. One good thing, or those are two good things to do, and then we're actually going to head up to the front of the boat. All right, so one last thing we want to do, back to our multi-surface cleaner, water-based. Spray that on our cloth again. And you're going to go around this trolling motor. Any like metal pieces you see, some screws here, just give those a good wipe down. Just kind of helps keep everything fresh for any kind of long periods of storage, whether that be midsummer, you go on a long vacation, or over winter, or anything like that. One other good thing to do, and just a quick and easy step. All right, so we have one extra bonus tip for you, and we're going to talk about the prop again. We have the Ultrex prop here. This thing's designed to come through weeds really well and kind of deflect those and cut through them, and it's efficient in doing that. So what happens is sometimes when you hit stumps or other rocks, you get big gouges. This one's not too bad, but you can see a decent gouge there, and that may affect the performance of the weedless aspect. So one thing you can do is grab some fine grit sandpaper and just give this a little rub down. You can see that actually changes a little bit there. It makes it a little bit sharper and gets back to more of an even flow of that prop versus a big gouge there, and that really just helps it cut through the weeds better and be more efficient when trying to troll through some of those weed beds and stuff like that. So that's one good quick thing that you can do throughout the year if you maybe hit a stump or a rock, and just kind of get that back to working and its full potential. All right guys, that's a wrap. Those are the main 10 maintenance items that we want to do to keep our trolling motors running like new for years to come and protect that investment.